In 1891, a Baltimore heating contractor named Clarence Kemp patented a device that heated all your household hot water for free. No electricity, no gas, no moving parts, powered entirely by the sun. You've been paying a water heating bill your entire adult life for something that was solved, commercially, over 130 years ago. The amount is small enough that you never think to question it. $200 a year, $400, some months more. It comes, you pay it, and you never asked why because nobody around you has ever asked why either. What nobody told you is that a system for heating all of your water for free, with zero electricity, zero gas, and zero moving parts, was commercially available in the United States in 1891. 1 million American homes had these systems installed by 1941. Miami Beach in 1940 had solar water heaters in an estimated 80% of its single-family homes. Not as an experiment, not as a political statement, as standard infrastructure, cheaper than the alternative, built by plumbers and manufacturers across a normal competitive market. Then the natural gas industry ran a pipeline into Florida and spent 20 years making sure you would never hear about those systems again. Your water heating bill is not the cost of physics. Hot water does not require fuel. It requires sunlight and a black pipe and a tank mounted above it. The rest, the monthly statement, the furnace replacement, the service contract, those are choices someone else made for you, decades before you were born, so they could collect a recurring payment from you for the rest of your life. One country decided instead to make solar water heating the law. Within a decade, 90% of that country's households were heating their water for free. They have been doing it for 45 years. We will get to that country, and to the specific financial mechanism that destroyed this industry in America, and to what that mechanism means for your bill today. This is Lost Build Archives. We recover the building knowledge that industries buried, the systems that work too well to be allowed, the techniques that cost nothing and last forever. If that matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell now. What we cover here, you will not hear from a contractor. The archive opens in Baltimore, Maryland in 1891. A heating contractor named Clarence Kemp, contractor by trade, observer by nature, had spent years watching his customers pay for fuel to heat water. Coal, wood, expensive oil shipped up the coast. He had also spent years noticing something simpler. A black metal object left in the sun gets hot. Water inside a black metal container gets hot. The physics did not require any formal education to observe. It required only attention and a willingness to build something around what you had seen. The climax solar water heater was a metal tank painted flat black, enclosed in a glass-fronted wooden box to trap the heat, mounted on the roof with the glass facing south. No pump, no electricity, no thermostat. Cold water in, hot water out, powered entirely by the sun. Price, $25. In 1891 money, that is roughly $850 today. Less than the installed cost of a conventional gas water heater in most American markets right now. Kemp's customers in Baltimore, then in New Jersey, then along the East Coast discovered that the climax heated their water to 90 degrees on a clear day, and held some of that heat overnight. It worked. It spread. The market functioned. Competitors emerged, refined the design, drove prices down. Then came the refinement that changed everything. A Carnegie Steel engineer named William Bailey, self-taught in applied thermodynamics, systematic where Kemp had been intuitive, figured out what Kemp had missed. Kemp's system heated the water but couldn't hold it. At night, when the sun set, the exposed tank lost its heat through the glass. The next morning, the water was cold again. Useful through the summer. Not useful on a cold March morning. Bailey's insight was the Thermosiphon. He separated the flat collector, the glass-covered tube panel that absorbed solar heat, from the storage tank, and mounted the storage tank above and behind the collector, heavily insulated against heat loss. Here is the physics he exploited. Hot water is less dense than cold water. Less dense water rises, cold water falls. Connect the bottom of the storage tank to the bottom of the collector. Connect the top of the collector to the top of the tank. Fill the system with water, point the collector at the sun, and you get water circulating continuously through the loop, driven by nothing but the temperature difference between the sun-heated collector and the cool tank above it. All day, without stopping, without a pump, without any moving part at all. Bailey patented the design in 1909 and founded the Day and Night Solar Hot Water Company in Southern California. By 1920, his company had sold 4,000 systems in California alone. That number deserves a pause. 4,000 systems in one state, in an era before television advertising, before interstate highways, before the internet. Word of mouth and catalog sales in an industry that had existed for less than 30 years. The reason the market grew so fast in California, and faster still in Florida, is worth understanding, because it explains everything that came after. Florida in the 1910s and 1920s had no natural gas pipeline. The state sits on limestone and salt water, not on hydrocarbon formations. Fuel oil was expensive and imported by ship. Electricity was unreliable in rural areas and expensive in cities. For a Florida homeowner, solar water heating was not an ideological position. It was simply the cheapest option available. The market sorted it that way for 3 decades straight. By 1930, competition had driven prices on simple batch heater systems down to $10 and $15. A black tank in a glass box, no moving parts, basic plumbing connections. A farm family could install one in an afternoon. By 1941, an estimated 1 million American homes had solar water heaters installed. The majority were in Florida, Southern California, and Arizona. In Miami Beach, trade press estimates put solar water heater penetration at 80% of single-family homes. Not a niche, not a movement, infrastructure. The question this raises is what happened between 1941 and right now. What decision was made? Not by consumers, not by the homeowners paying the bills, that erased 60 years of market development in less than a decade. The simplicity of how the system works is the entire reason that decision was possible. Take a piece of black copper tubing, mount it under glass facing south. Connect the bottom of that tubing to the bottom of a well-insulated water tank. Connect the top of the tubing to the top of that tank. Fill the system with water. Point it at the sun. That is the complete description of a functional solar water heating system. Everything else, the pumps, the controllers, the pressure regulators, the annual service visits, the 7-year warranty with the $200 deductible, those are additions to this basic system, improvements in some cases, but the core requires none of them. Here is why it works, stated as plainly as the physics allows. Water at different temperatures has different densities. Hot water is less dense than cold water. When you heat the water in the collector panel, that heated water becomes less dense and rises naturally toward the top of the system. The cooler, denser water in the bottom of the storage tank flows down through the connecting pipe to replace it in the collector. The cycle repeats as long as the sun is hitting the collector. No pump required, no electricity required. The temperature differential does the work. This is the Thermosiphon effect, and it has been known since the 1890s. It is not exotic technology. It is not experimental. It is the same principle that causes hot air to rise in a room, that causes warm water to float at the top of a lake, that causes smoke to go up a chimney. Applied to a solar collector and a storage tank, it produces continuous water circulation that gets progressively hotter throughout the day. A properly designed flat plate collector, glass-covered copper tubes, selective black coating on the absorber plate, captures between 60 and 80% of the solar energy that hits its surface. The selective coating is the key detail. It absorbs 95% of the solar spectrum, while emitting only 5% of its own heat as infrared radiation back to the atmosphere. Flat black paint absorbs 90% but also emits 90% back. The selective coating keeps the heat in. That single material advance is what makes the modern system work in climates far north of Florida. A modern evacuated tube collector takes this further. Each tube is a tube within a tube, with a vacuum between them. The same principle as a thermos flask. The vacuum eliminates convective heat loss almost entirely. These systems operate at air temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit, because the vacuum does not care about the air outside it. As long as the sun is present, the collector absorbs and transfers heat. They work in Norway, They work in Minnesota. The technology is not limited to the Sunbelt, and the energy industry has made sure you believe otherwise. The numbers on what this means financially are worth stating precisely. The average American household spends $400 to $600 per year on water heating, approximately 15% of the total energy bill. A solar water heating system sized for a family of 4, roughly 20 square feet of collector, and an 80-gallon insulated storage tank eliminates $300 to $500 of that annual cost. Installed materials cost between $1,500 and $3,000. Payback period in most American climates, 4 to 8 years. After that payback, the hot water is free. The system has no moving parts. Copper collectors installed in the 1970s are still operational today. A well-installed Thermosiphon has a functional lifespan of 20 to 40 years, longer than the average gas water heater by a factor of 2 or 3. The simplest version, what the industry calls a batch heater, can be built from hardware store materials for under $300. There are homeowners who have operated these systems for 15 years without a single repair, because there is nothing to repair. Hot water rises, cold water falls. The sun does the work. This was true in 1891. It is true right now. So the system worked in 1891. It worked in 1941. It works today. 1 million American homes ran on it. The physics has not changed. The sun has not changed. The question this raises is not technical. It is financial. Who benefited from this being forgotten? And how precisely did they arrange it? In 1954, a company called Florida Gas Transmission began construction of a pipeline connecting the natural gas fields of the Gulf Coast to the state of Florida. Florida had never had natural gas. The state has no gas reserves of its own. It sits on limestone and salt water, not on hydrocarbon formations. For 60 years, Florida homeowners had heated their water with the sun, because the sun was the cheapest option available. The solar water heating industry had built its strongest American market precisely because Florida had no pipeline. The Florida Gas Transmission Pipeline was not built because Floridians asked for gas. It was built because Gulf Coast gas producers had surplus production capacity and needed a market. Florida, with 1 million potential customers and 0 existing gas infrastructure, was the target. The pipeline reached Jacksonville by 1956. It reached Miami by 1959. What happened in the following decade is not a conspiracy. It requires no illegal agreement, no backroom meeting, no coordinated fraud. It requires only the basic arithmetic of a utility company's revenue model. A gas utility that connects a homeowner to its pipeline in 1958 will collect gas bills from that homeowner for the next 40 years. The present value of 40 years of monthly payments, discounted to $1958, is substantial. Substantial enough to justify pricing the product below the actual cost of delivery for several years at the beginning. Not to make money, but to capture customers. The math works because the homeowner who switches from solar to gas this year will be paying gas bills in 1998. 3 years of below-cost pricing is an investment in a 40-year revenue stream. This is what the Florida gas utilities did. Introductory connection and usage rates, documented in utility commission records from the period, were priced below the actual delivered cost of the gas. You were being priced away from free. Alongside the below-cost pricing came the contractor programs. Plumbers and heating installers are the people closest to the homeowner's decision about a water heater. They are the ones asked, trusted, relied upon to recommend. The Florida gas utilities built formal incentive programs that paid plumbers rebates and volume bonuses for recommending gas water heater installations. Solar water heater companies could not build equivalent programs because a solar system, once installed, generates no recurring revenue, no gas to sell, no service contract, no annual maintenance required, nothing. The plumber who recommended solar received a one-time installation fee. The plumber who recommended gas received a rebate, a preferred supplier relationship, and the prospect of a customer who would call him back for gas supply and service for the next 30 years. This is how markets get tilted. Not by law, not by ban, by changing the financial calculation of the person the customer trusts. Then came the cultural pressure, which cost less than everything else and lasted longer. In the 1950s, Total Electric Home and Gas Makes Life Better were coordinated industry campaigns backed by utility money. The framing was not subtle. Electricity and gas were modern. Solar was old-fashioned. A family that heated water with the sun was a family that couldn't afford real infrastructure. A family with a gas water heater had arrived. This narrative did not need to make solar illegal. It just needed to make you forget it existed. By making solar seem like the choice of people who had no options, it ensured that everyone who did have options chose gas. By 1960, within 5 years of the pipeline's completion, the solar water heating industry in Florida had effectively ceased to function. Dozens of manufacturers and installers had closed or switched to installing gas units. The installed base of 1 million systems aged and was not replaced. When a solar water heater failed, a gas unit went in. When a new home was built, a gas unit went in. The choice was made, not by the homeowner, but by the economics of the contractor's recommendation and the cultural weight of the modern home narrative. Clarence Kemp's climax. Solar water heater had been on the market for 60 years. William Bailey's Day and Night Solar Company had sold systems across the country. The industry they had built through normal market competition was dismantled, not because it stopped working, but because a competing industry spent a decade changing whose financial interests were served by the recommendation. The industry didn't need to make solar illegal, it just needed to make sure you never heard of it again. In 1973, the oil crisis briefly revived interest. President Carter installed solar panels on the White House roof in 1979 and passed tax credits for solar thermal systems. A second wave of solar water heater companies formed. The market began to rebuild. Then Ronald Reagan won the election of 1980. In 1986, during a White House roof renovation, the solar panels were removed. Reagan's energy secretary asked about them, said they didn't seem to be working very well. The solar tax credits expired. The second wave collapsed faster than the first, a market that had only existed for 7 years, dependent on subsidies, in a regulatory environment shaped by the same utility economics that had erased the first wave. The second suppression required even less effort than the first. The memory had been erased once. Erasing it again was easier. Today, the United States has fewer than 1.5 million solar water heating installations in a country of 140 million occupied housing units. Below 1% penetration. A technology that worked for 60 years, in climate zones with more solar resource than most of Europe, used in less than 1% of the buildings that could use it. Not because it stopped working, because someone, decades ago, did the math on a 40-year customer, and you were it. In 1980, while Ronald Reagan was winning the American presidency partly on a platform of eliminating solar subsidies, the government of Israel was running different arithmetic. Israel has no natural gas reserves, no coal, no oil of its own. What it has is sunlight, approximately 300 days of it per year in most of the country, and a government that looked at its energy import bill and made a decision based on numbers rather than on utility industry lobbying. The Israeli encouragement of solar energy in buildings law, passed in 1980 and amended in 1983, requires solar water heating in all new residential buildings under 8 stories. Not a suggestion, not a subsidy. A building code requirement, the same as structural integrity or fire egress. You cannot legally build a new home in Israel without a solar water heater. Within a decade, the majority of Israeli homes were heating water with the sun. By 2021, penetration had reached 90% of the residential housing stock. The law saves Israel the equivalent of 1.5 million barrels of oil per year. Per household, the annual savings run between $300 and $400 in avoided energy costs. The law passed over the objection of Israeli energy companies, who had just completed significant natural gas infrastructure investments. The government passed it anyway. The homeowners benefited. This has been the situation for 45 years. Cyprus is at 94% household penetration, the highest in Europe, the cheapest residential hot water in Europe. China decided in the 1990s that the fastest path to energy security ran through solar thermal. Manufacturing scale drove costs down. A Chinese family can today buy a rooftop evacuated tube system for under $200. By 2021, China had installed 290 million square meters of solar water heater collector area, more than the rest of the world combined. That thermal capacity is equivalent to 200 nuclear power plants, delivering free hot water to tens of millions of households every single day. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory published an analysis in 2009, concluding that solar water heating was cost competitive with conventional water heating in most US markets without any subsidies. The primary barrier to adoption was identified as regulatory and structural: utility rate structures designed to disadvantage solar thermal, and the absence of any institutional advocate for a technology that generates no recurring revenue for anyone in the existing system. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory followed with research showing that in states where utility commissions required utilities to fund solar incentive programs, Hawaii, California, solar water heating penetration reached between 5 and 8%. In states without those programs, below 0.5%, despite comparable or superior solar resources, despite the same technology at the same cost. The variable that predicted adoption in the United States was not climate, not cost, not technology. It was whether the people selling energy had been required by law to help you use less of it. Hawaii passed a state law in 2010 requiring solar water heating in all new single-family residential construction. The home builders who opposed it now advertise their solar water heater installations as a selling point. The simplest version of a solar water heater is called a batch heater, a black tank inside an insulated glass-fronted box mounted on the south-facing roof or on a ground frame angled toward the sun. The cold water supply connects at the bottom. The hot water outlet runs from the top. Thermosiphon circulation does the rest. No pump, no controls, no electricity. The materials are at any hardware store: black spray paint, a used water tank, rigid foam insulation, old patio door glass or polycarbonate sheeting, standard copper pipe fittings. Total cost, documented by builders in homesteading communities across the country: $200 to $400, not $1,500, not $3,000, $200 to $400, with basic hand tools and 1 weekend. The systems people have built and documented in these communities perform consistently with what the academic literature predicts. 60 to 80% of annual hot water needs in most American climates, zero operating cost, zero moving parts, and zero maintenance beyond occasional descaling of mineral deposits from the pipes. The same maintenance any water heater requires. The advanced version, evacuated tube collectors with proper thermosiphon tanks, is available today from Chinese manufacturers for under $200 for a complete system sized for a family of 4. Shipping to the United States runs another $100 to $150. Total cost: $350 for a complete system that a competent homeowner can install in a day. 20-year lifespan. Same physics, same results. $350 over 20 years versus $9,000 in conventional water heating bills over the same period. The American companies that tried to compete in this space after the oil crisis of 1973 mostly failed. Not because the technology didn't work, but because they were building expensive manufacturing operations into a market that utility commission structures in 49 states had no interest in supporting. The Chinese companies built manufacturing scale for a government that had decided solar thermal was infrastructure. They built 290 million square meters of it. The cost came down accordingly. The American homeowner is the beneficiary of that cost reduction, whether the American utility industry likes it or not. The knowledge is recovered. The technology is available. The cost is within reach of any homeowner who decides to build instead of pay. Every month that passes is another month's payment to an industry that spent 60 years ensuring you never ran the comparison. The batch heater on the roof costs $300 and lasts 15 years. 15 years of conventional water heating bills in the average American home, $6,000 to $9,000. The math was never complicated. The only thing that was complicated was making sure you never ran it. Every system that requires no monthly payment is a system that someone, somewhere, has a financial interest in making sure you never install. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is an arithmetic observation about the relationship between recurring revenue and the alternatives to it. The Thermosiphon solar water heater was not invented by a revolutionary. It was invented by a Baltimore plumber who noticed that black metal gets hot in the sun. It was refined by a steel company engineer who understood that hot water rises. It heated the water of 1 million American homes for 60 years before a pipeline and a contractor incentive program made it disappear from memory. The knowledge did not disappear with the industry. It waited. It is still here. In 1988, a German physicist named Wolfgang Feist designed a building that used 90% less heating energy than the German code required. Not with exotic technology, but with a pipe buried 6 feet underground that pre-conditioned every breath of incoming air before the furnace fired once. The same industry that buried Clarence Kemp's solar heater spent the following decades making sure this one never reached your building code. The ground temperature is still there right now, beneath your yard. That is the next video. Click it now.